Millions of cameras record us every single day. Most of it means nothing, just life passing by. But sometimes, a simple recording captures something no one was supposed to see. These are 6 of the most disturbing moments ever caught on camera. It was March 11, 2016, in Kreuzberg, Berlin. The air outside was cold, and inside a narrow warehouse gallery, people queued for the opening of a young artist's installation. The piece promised to dissolve perception through dense fog and lighting. Nobody expected that illusion to turn deadly. Anna Kruger, 30, lived for Berlin's small art scene. She worked nights as a barista and spent afternoons volunteering at pop-up exhibitions. She wasn't wealthy, but she was dependable, known among students for helping staff independent galleries that relied on unpaid labor. She loved immersive experiences, anything that played with light, sound, or perception, and often said real art should unsettle you, just enough to make you see differently. She had helped with several fog installations before, so when the gallery needed an usher for a new event, she agreed immediately. The artist used nitrogen-bubbled fog to create a floor-level white cloud. The gear involved chilled CO2 machines and nitrogen foggers meant for large outdoor stages, not confined rooms. Manufacturer notes warned against exceeding 20 people or disabling ventilation. The setup displaced oxygen near the floor, a risk everyone ignored. The event had no on-site safety officer or gas monitoring system, common omissions in small independent galleries. The manager, under pressure to deliver a flawless opening, dismissed the warnings as overly cautious, saying the fog would clear on its own. By 9 p.m., the space was packed. Dozens waited outside, phones ready. The manager switched off one vent to prolong the visual effect. Anna guided visitors with a flashlight, waving them toward the door when their time was up. It was loud and chaotic. People coughing but laughing. Near closing, Anna told a friend she wanted one last walkthrough before they powered everything down. Footage from the ticket scanner camera shows Anna entering alone. Within seconds, her figure blurs in the fog. One usher noticed several people returning pale and disoriented, thinking it was a reaction to the strobe lights. When she went in to check, visibility was near zero. Her phone light revealed Anna collapsed on her side, her face pale and lips bluish. 2 patrons helped pull her out while someone forced the windows open. Paramedics arrived within 10 minutes. They performed CPR immediately and administered high-flow oxygen on site, but she went into cardiac arrest en route to Charité Hospital. Doctors confirmed hypoxic injury from oxygen displacement. The investigation later found the foggers had continued venting nitrogen for over a minute after the emergency fans were turned off. Oxygen at ankle height had dropped to below 10%, enough to cause unconsciousness in under 30 seconds. A report from the fire brigade noted that the nitrogen flow system lacked an automatic shutoff and that the venue's ceiling extraction fans were insufficient for rapid gas exchange. The ventilation override had been taped down earlier to avoid resetting during performances. The news spread through Berlin's art community overnight. The gallery shut its social pages, and other venues quietly canceled immersive shows. Artists debated responsibility. Some called it a tragic system failure. Others blamed the reckless desire to push experience beyond safe limits. The artist behind the event withdrew from public life, refusing interviews. It was July 19, 2014 at Cornwall Regional Airport. The weekend air show drew hundreds of hobbyists. The hum of engines and diesel machinery mixed with laughter and chatter. Somewhere in that noise, a small decision, to get just a little closer for a better shot, would become irreversible. Callum Price, 24, had been obsessed with aviation since childhood. He studied aircraft maintenance but had not yet secured a full-time job, supplementing income by doing freelance video editing and uploading flight clips to a small YouTube channel. He craved recognition within the online plane spotting community, a niche world that rewarded daring angles and proximity. His channel had recently hit 10,000 views on a video filmed near a taxiway, encouraging him to push further. He was known to his friends as bright but impulsive. Callum carried a DSLR with a fixed lens, a small stabilizer rig, and noise-canceling headphones for monitoring sound. The day's conditions were ideal. Calm winds, good light, and a vintage de Havilland twin prop scheduled to depart at noon. He wanted a low, front-facing shot of its takeoff, with the landing gear lifting over his camera. Marshals had set up rope lines along the apron, but smaller airfields often allowed informal access. Ground vehicles operated in close proximity to spectators. At around 11:45 a.m., Callum slipped past the rope to a position behind a parked tow tractor. He crouched low, aligning his rig on a small tripod pointed toward the runway. The tow tractor, used to reposition aircraft, was idling between duties. Its driver, occupied with radio calls, had left it momentarily before reboarding to shift another plane. Several spectators were filming nearby, and one GoPro on a tripod captured the entire scene. Witnesses later recalled Callum adjusting his camera for several minutes, oblivious to the tractor's status. He wore large headphones, which dulled surrounding sounds. A friend shouted from the spectator area, but he didn't react. The tractor operator, after finishing a maneuver ahead, backed the vehicle to clear space for the taxiing plane. From his cab, visibility to the rear was limited. Callum's crouched position placed him directly below the driver's line of sight, hidden by the vehicle's rear wheel arch. Footage from a spectator's camera shows the tow tractor's reverse lights flash. A faint rumble follows as it begins rolling backward. Callum, noticing movement too late, stands abruptly, half-turned toward the driver. The left rear tire catches his hip, pinning him against the wheel of a parked Cessna. People in the background freeze, then rush forward as the tractor stops abruptly. The GoPro's wide shot captures the driver exiting in panic and bystanders shouting for help. Emergency marshals reached him within seconds. Callum was semi-conscious but unable to move, his lower body trapped beneath the tractor's chassis. The on-site medical crew stabilized his airway and circulation, while firefighters used lifting airbags to raise the vehicle. Despite rapid extraction, he went into shock from massive pelvic trauma. Resuscitation efforts continued for 20 minutes before he was declared dead on the apron at approximately 12:10 p.m. The authorities reviewed the footage and cited multiple failures in crowd management and equipment safety. The inquiry described the combination of relaxed supervision and spectator access as negligent by event design. The Cornwall Air Show was discontinued after that season. Amateur clips circulated briefly online before being removed at his family's request. His parents avoided interviews, releasing only a short message thanking rescuers. It was June 3, 2013, in Lyon, France. The Rue des Capucins had been half closed for weeks, its old stone facades lined with barricades and the sharp smell of wet cement in the air. Beneath the temporary fencing, a small subcontracting crew worked overtime to finish a narrow trench that cut across the cobblestone street. The decision to push through another late shift, despite rising gas readings, seemed practical at the time. Just one more day to stay on schedule. Marc Moreau, 41, was a foreman with 2 decades of experience in municipal works. He'd started as a digger in his 20s and worked his way up, known for staying calm when others panicked. He ran a small crew of 6 under a city subcontractor that handled the utility tie-ins for Lyon's metro expansion. The company depended on staying in favor with the main contractor, and Marc often took on extra hours to meet deadlines. The trench they were cutting was part of a drainage link between old and new utility lines, shallow by metro standards, but complicated by the neighborhood's centuries-old cellars and voids. The ground here was unpredictable. Old organic waste and gas pockets were common, and municipal safety protocols required ventilation fans and periodic gas checks. The meters had shown fluctuating methane levels for 2 days, hovering around warning thresholds. Marc, eager to clear the job, told his men to keep fans running and continue cutting concrete for the cap slabs. The risk seemed minor, and stopping would mean missing the deadline. That afternoon, conditions worsened subtly. The air was heavy and humid, and the portable extractor fan sputtered intermittently under dust clogging its intake. A younger worker mentioned a faint odor in the trench, but Marc brushed it off. They had already drilled half the length. Turning back now would lose hours. Nearby shop cameras later showed pedestrians walking by as the crew worked behind fencing. The government's fixed CCTV caught the same scene in grainy detail. A man standing by the trench with a saw, others shoveling debris. At 17:42, a faint white vapor drifted upward from the open pit. One worker turned, pointing toward it. Before anyone reacted, a flash erupted, a flat white glare that filled the frame, followed by a rolling cloud of dust. The explosion's pressure wave threw men backward, scattering helmets and tools across the street. Windows along the block blew inward. Bystanders ran toward the smoke as debris settled. The trench itself had collapsed inward, burning insulation and splintered boards visible under a layer of dust. 2 workers lay near the curb, stunned but conscious. Mark had been directly above the saw when the gas ignited. Firefighters arrived within 5 minutes, responding to multiple emergency calls, and immediately ordered gas company technicians to shut nearby valves. The crew secured the area, used portable detectors to rule out residual leaks, and searched the pit with thermal imagers before pulling out the injured. Mark was pronounced dead at the scene from blast trauma and internal injuries. An investigation by authorities later determined that methane concentration had spiked moments before ignition, likely from a small underground cavity venting into the open trench. The cutting saw's 2-stroke petrol engine emitted a spark as it hit a rebar joint, enough to trigger the air-fuel mix. Rue des Capucins stayed cordoned off for months. The subcontractor was fined for breach of safety obligations, and the main contractor was cited for insufficient site supervision. Mark's surviving crew refused tunneling work for the rest of the year, several transferring to surface projects or quitting entirely. It was August 29, 2018, at an airport in southern Thailand. A Boeing 737 stood parked on the apron, its engines idling for pre-departure checks. Somsak Anarak, who had walked these lanes for 2 decades, moved without hurry. That familiarity made what followed all the more senseless. Somsak, 46, was a senior ground technician under a third-party contractor servicing multiple airlines. Over the years, he'd trained dozens of younger handlers and built a reputation as reliable, quiet, and stubbornly old-fashioned. His hearing had worsened from years of jet noise, and though the company offered ear defenders and safety refreshers, he often slipped into old habits, relying on muscle memory instead of radio cues. He had just a few years until retirement, saving for a house inland with his wife. The apron that night was slick and noisy. Several aircraft idled in parallel stands while the 737 he serviced was preparing for a midnight flight to Singapore. Technicians were performing an engine run-up as part of a post-maintenance ground power test, not yet connected to the boarding gate. The procedure required restricted access, with cones and safety lines marking the intake and exhaust hazard zones, roughly 25 feet forward and 100 feet aft at idle thrust. Ground crews were briefed, but with the shift running late, many moved in and out of zones freely. Somsak was assigned to retrieve empty baggage trolleys and secure the final tow bar. Shortly after 11 p.m., the left engine of the 737 began low idle operation. Warning beacons flashed, but on the cluttered apron, they blended with dozens of other lights. Somsak noticed one of the bright orange safety cones had toppled near the intake line. He walked toward it, while the others loaded carts onto the tug. CCTV later showed he was holding a handheld radio to his chest mic as he stooped to pick up the cone, seemingly unaware of the engine's rising hum. The nearest co-worker, roughly 50 feet away, later told investigators that Somsak was directly in front of the intake line for at least 3 seconds before he disappeared from view. The security camera captured it clearly. The reflective strips on his vest flickered in the jet wash, then whipped forward as the suction intensified. The cone rolled toward the engine, and in the same instant, Somsak was yanked off balance, first stumbling, then vanishing as if pulled through a doorway. A distinct thud and flame flash followed as the fan blades ingested debris. Ground crew rushed forward as the engine spooled down automatically after a compressor stall and flameout. Emergency responders arrived within minutes, cordoning off the aircraft and securing the scene. Maintenance personnel inspected the intake. What remained of the reflective vest was tangled in the fan hub and first compressor stage. Recovery teams later used tools and partial fan cowl removal to clear the debris. The coroner's report listed instantaneous death from blunt force trauma and massive internal injuries. Engineers confirmed the engine ingested multiple foreign objects within half a second, causing fan imbalance, bearing damage, and automatic shutdown. Civil aviation investigators concluded the cause as human error, compounded by fatigue and procedural lapses. The exclusion zone cones had been misplaced, and no safety marshal or headset operator had been assigned to guard the live engine area. Contrary to protocol, the report noted that Somsak's partially disabled hearing likely prevented him from recognizing the danger as he crossed the line. 2 nights later, Airport workers held a quiet vigil on the same apron. Dozens of candles lined the painted red boundary near where he'd fallen. Authorities issued a short statement, acknowledging an incident during ground operations. The 737's damaged engine was overhauled and returned to service 3 months later. It was March 4, 2016 in Antwerp, Belgium. The morning was routine inside the industrial compound of Van Globe Detergents. Nothing about the shift stood out except the quiet foolishness of trying to finish a job too efficiently. Marianne de Wilde, 33, had worked at Van Globe for 8 years. A quality technician, she was known for precision bordering on obsession, neat handwriting in logbooks, exact decimal readings, perfect clipboard margins. Off the clock, she was pragmatic and steady, someone co-workers trusted to double-check their work. But familiarity with the plant made her comfortable enough to cut corners when small things seemed harmless. Her supervisors trusted her so much they rarely questioned her methods. The tanks she monitored were decades old, built from thin stainless steel meant for storing detergents at atmospheric pressure. Negative pressure was their weakness. Every employee learned that during training, yet in practice vents jammed all the time, and draining them without repair was common, a temporary fix that usually worked. The plant's safety manual, laminated and ignored, warned that closed vents during draining may lead to catastrophic collapse. It was written in bold red letters she had probably read 100 times. That morning, Marianne was assigned to drain Tank 4, a 20,000-liter mixer used for concentrated liquids. Maintenance was behind schedule, so she offered to record the procedure as an internal training clip. She set up her phone on a tripod aimed at the tank's lower outlet, speaking clearly to camera as she described the valve sequence. The plant's shift engineer had logged the vent line as sticking the day before, but no repair order had been issued. The vent line above her head had jammed halfway open, but the gauge needle sat motionless, and she dismissed it. A colleague passing through mentioned hearing a hissing tone from the line, but she waved him off, likely assuming it was residual pressure. The tank was nearly empty when the pitch of the sound deepened, a warning no one recognized until too late. In the background of the recording, there's a subtle metallic creak around the 20-second mark. Investigators would later slow that audio to isolate it, the moment when internal pressure dropped below atmospheric. The tank's shell began to flex inward. Marianne stepped closer, glancing at the gauge, still narrating. Then, with no visible trigger, the steel cylinder caved in. It happened in less than half a second. The upper walls folded downward, the seams along the weld snapping like rifle shots. The implosion drew her forward before she could react, a vacuum pulling air and loose foam toward the collapsing surface. Co-workers in the adjacent bay heard what they later described as a single thunderclap. One ran in and found the tank reduced to a crushed oval, ends crimped inward like a squeezed can. They saw the edge of her reflective vest trapped beneath the twisted rim. Emergency teams arrived within minutes, but the damage was complete, a blunt, instantaneous crush injury that left no chance of recovery. The footage she filmed, time-stamped 9/17/42, was used to confirm the failure sequence and timing. Investigators found the vent valve completely seized and the vacuum relief line disconnected during earlier maintenance. A failed vacuum breaker fitting was also found on the floor nearby, likely dislodged by vibration weeks earlier. Operations at Van Globe resumed after 3 days, though most employees refused to work near the rebuilt bay for weeks. Supervisors added new lockout rules and banned solo cleaning procedures. Marianne's recording was edited, muted, and distributed as part of a Continental Safety module. It was April 16, 2017, in Pattaya, Thailand. The streets below the neon lights of Soi Buakau were thinning out after midnight. From the 4th floor of a budget hotel, laughter carried faintly over the sound of traffic. It was the kind of late, stupid hour when small dares start to feel harmless. Michael Torres, 32 from Cebu City, worked as a call center technician handling night shifts for an Australian telecom company. He was known as the type who could make any dull shift bearable. Loud, funny, a little reckless when drinking. That weekend in Pattaya was his first trip abroad, organized by a coworker who'd found cheap flights and a hotel package online. He'd spent most of the night filming TikTok clips, dancing with strangers and showing off their view of the city lights. He wasn't an influencer, just another guy performing for his phone, chasing a few seconds of attention. The hotel itself was old, a 4-story concrete block with chipped blue paint and railings worn smooth from years of salt air. The balconies were narrow, barely 2 feet deep, with a low waist-high rail, legal by code but fragile in places. The ledges beneath them were meant for rain runoff, not for standing. Locals knew that, but tourists treated them like props. Around 1:20 a.m., Michael and 2 co-workers came back from the rooftop bar across the street. The hotel CCTV captured them laughing in the hallway before stepping onto the balcony for cigarettes. Nearby cameras, including one facing the facade from another building, recorded the next 10 minutes in grainy color. They leaned over the railing, gesturing toward the street, then took turns mimicking a viral TikTok challenge, pretending to balance on narrow edges for photos. One of his friends laughed nervously and told him to stop, but Michael, holding his phone in one hand, said he'd done it before. He wasn't serious about danger, it was just part of the act. The footage shows him stepping 1 foot onto the ledge, the other still on the balcony tile. He steadied himself with his left hand on the rail, grinning toward the phone light. A faint metallic creak followed. Not loud, just enough to make one friend glance up. Michael shifted his weight slightly backward, the sole of his sandal slipping on condensation. His hand shot toward the railing but missed by inches. The fall was silent until the brief, dull impact on the awning below, followed by the heavy thud on the pavement. A security guard inside the lobby heard the noise and ran outside. He found Michael face down near the base of the awning frame, one leg folded unnaturally beneath him. The guard's radio log and 911 equivalent dispatch record timestamped the call to emergency services at 1:23 a.m. Paramedics arrived within minutes from a nearby Rescue Foundation unit, but confirmed death on the scene. Blunt force trauma consistent with a 4-story fall. Police documented the position of the phone and cigarette pack nearby before sealing the area. The Thai police report described it as accidental fall due to unsafe behavior. In Cebu, his co-workers collected donations to repatriate his remains. His family received the call before sunrise. Of the 2 friends who had been with him, one later told reporters that the video was deleted immediately after the accident. The other deleted his social media accounts days later. The small funeral service ended before noon, with the family choosing not to speak, only watching as the casket was lowered into the ground under light rain. Thanks for watching. If you like what you see, click here.